This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, I call to order this meeting of the Planning Commission, December 15th, 2020. We are working under modified restrictions, I guess. We've got people at present in the council chambers as well as on online attending the meeting virtually. And the chairman is one of the people who is virtually out there, and I'm vice chair filling in for him. He's there until he can no longer be there. He was afraid he might have to be called away. So we'll start with the flag salute. Please, everybody join me. Pledge allegiance to the flag
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And a reminder that cell phones, pagers, similar devices need to be on silent or vibrate unless you're an on-duty emergency responder. Let's start with a consent calendar.
Let's just do a
Or excuse me, roll call first.
I don't think you can hear you. Might need to talk into that a little bit more. Commissioner Sarkozy?
Here.
Commissioner Stroman?
Here.
Commissioner Danziger?
Here.
Vice Chair Willis?
Here.
Chair Castellanos?
Here.
Okay, the consent calendar, approval of the minutes. Are there any questions or corrections, or is there a motion to pass the minutes, to approve the minutes?
Vice Chair Willis, I'd like to move to approve the meeting minutes from the Escalon Planning Commission for September 15th, 2020.
Okay, motion made. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Who was it?
That's good.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, the minutes are approved as submitted. We've got a public hearing to consider the following item. Application 20-689B, McHenry Avenue. Request for a 2-year extension to a previously approved tentative parcel map. Is there a staff report, please?
Yes. Madam Vice Chair. The item that comes before you was previously approved by the Planning Commission back in October 2018. And it was a tentative parcel map, site plan, and conditional use permit under applicant Kevin Wentworth. Pursuant to the municipal code, chapter 17.51. Procedures, all approvals granted pursuant to this title, except those established by ordinance, shall expire if the permitted activity is not commenced within 2 years after approval unless extended by the deciding body. An extension may be granted for up to 2 additional years if written application was submitted at least 60 days before the lapse of original approval. City staff did reach out to the applicant advising of the potential expiration due to the projects at a standstill. And the applicant was responsive and interested in that extension. So once we received that written request for the extension, we published our public hearing notice in the local newspaper, as well as sent out the notices to all property owners within 300-foot radius, and advised that the application request and public hearing date and time. We also provided notifications of updates on the request for extension to all the outside agencies that had provided feedback, as well as the ones that maybe did not. And no additional or revised comments were provided. We have included a copy of the original application as a reference, along with the action letter, which listed the final conditions of approval imposed upon the project by the Planning Commission. And then once again, if the project does not commence within that 2-year extension period, the project would expire and a new application and public hearing would be required. So as intended, this project has no changes from the original application. It's the exact same project that was approved by the Planning Commission back in 2018. asking for that 2-year extension period.
Where's the black computer at?
And just to reiterate, we approached them about the extension. They didn't approach us about the extension.
We typically try to calendar them to remind ourselves, to remind people when the project is done. We were a little bit late on that, and because we were a little late on that, we gave them an extension to be able to provide the extension because we were as well. So there are no changes if you have any questions.
I'm sorry to interrupt. If this extension is granted, is it a 2-year extension based off the original approval date, or is it 2 years after the planning commission approval of the extension? Because in looking at the documents that were provided, the originally we approved this in October
2018.
Right.
So yeah, it would be a 2-year extension, and so we would probably do it from today's date, correct?
Mhm.
Yeah, so it'll be till like December 15th, 2022. I had to think about that.
Okay, any other questions in for staff from you? I'm gonna go to the other commission. Okay,
And we do have Mr. Wentworth in the audience if you have any questions specifically.
okay, I'm gonna start with the Chair Castellanos, just in case you do have to leave. Did you have any questions of staff on this?
Not at this time.
What do you think?
Not at this time.
Okay.
This time.
Commissioner Danziger, you have any questions of staff?
I just was curious if anything's changed since the last approval.
No, it's the exact same application. Nothing has changed.
Okay. No comment. Thank you.
Extension of the same thing, yeah.
Commissioner Sarkozy? Any questions of staff?
No, nothing to add from me.
Okay, since the applicant is here, I'll open up the public hearing and ask him or anyone else to step forward. Give your name and address and any information you'd like to add.
Good evening, Dave Bellinger. I've got a question if you've got a chance. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Dave Bellinger, 1420 Winterbrook Street. On the original proposal, we had put in a couple of conditions. The first 4 spots, I don't know if anybody recalls, we were talking about a height limit on some RV storage along the back. Does that stay within this process here as originally intended?
Yes, it does.
Okay, and then secondarily, we did not have a light plan when we originally went over this. Has there been any movement on the light plan design yet? Because I know we had some open-ended questions there that needed to be addressed if we do have a light plan that we haven't seen yet. That's still available for discussion, shall we say, once it is proposed?
Yes, it would be the same condition that's in there. And so I'm not under, I don't believe the project has gotten that far yet to be able to provide the lighting plan, but it is conditioned in the project that once they do get to that point, the lighting plan would need to be submitted for review.
Okay. Thank you very much.
So, Ms. Romo, before we open the public hearing, or I'm sorry, before we get to the applicant, wouldn't the lighting plan be a condition of the building permit, not necessarily planning commission approval? Is that a correct assumption? Because the only condition that we noted when we worked with the applicant was that the lighting face away from those residences along that back side. And so I don't think the lighting plan is a condition of approval for planning commission approval, correct?
It's written into the conditions as a part of the project approval. So once he gets to that point, he'll submit his site plan for the area. And when we are getting all of that stuff reviewed, at some point, the lighting would come in and we would have him either, he could submit it all at once, or he would submit it as a later approval, depending on how the lighting is going to be done, and then that would be approved by our engineer.
But as the planning commission, we don't really.
It won't come back to planning commission.
We
No.
don't care about the lighting plan. That's more of a condition of approval of the project and obtaining the building to perform the job, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Wentworth?
Your answer?
Anything further to present beyond what we have? I'm just wondering why the extension is needed, why I mean, I kind of know what's going on in the world, but still specifically to you,
Yeah. Just my business in general going to come and invest, well over $1 million to develop this, a timely time to do that for me in this season right now. I like the project. I want to move forward with it, but it is.
you see within 2 years, the situation changing.
We hope. I'm sure so. We'll go on our way. Vice Chair, may I ask a question of staff? So if we approve the 2-year extension and let's say it's December 14th, 2022, and we still don't have the project, do we only allow a one-time 2-year extension? Or, I mean, given the economic conditions, what happens if Mr. Wentworth is still trying to survive and can't build the project, hasn't built the project in 2 years? Are there any more subsequent 2-year extensions after that?
So the way the municipal code is written, no. But I mean, when that time comes, we can definitely reevaluate that and see what can be done at that time. But the way the municipal code currently reads is a one-time 2-year extension. And then if that was to expire with no stuff, then you'd have to start over again.
Without getting into business environment, I think what Mr. Wentworth said is very true. The businesses are just trying to survive. And, I think I remember distinctly this project because we actually had folks in the audience talking about it. And we worked through the lighting, talked about the storage plans and arrangements of the RVs. And I think as a planning commission, we were all really excited about the project. And I don't think it's necessarily fair to Mr. Wentworth if this, given the economic conditions. So that's something as the planning commission will keep our fingers crossed for you, Mr. Wentworth, and see what happens.
There are things that he has no control over. Yeah. Okay, thank you, Mr. Wentworth. Is there anyone else in the audience who would like to address this issue, or anyone out there virtually who would like to raise a point or ask a question? If not, I'll close the public hearing and bring it back to the commission. Any of the commissioners have any further things to question or contribute? Chairman Castellanos? Is he gone?
I'm still here. I would hope that we get this RV storage in town. I think that there's a need for it. So I'm all in favor of this extension to see if we can get this thing off the ground in the next 2 years. So.
Commissioner Sarkozy?
No, I'm all for it also. Love to see it move forward. I just drove by it today and said, oh, this is what we'll be talking about tonight. So excited to hear about it again, and hopefully something happens sooner than later.
Commissioner Danziger?
I agree with the other commissioners there. I'm in favor of this project there, and I have no problem granting the 2-year extension.
Okay, can I hear a motion?
I'll motion. I will motion to approve the application 20-689B on McHenry Avenue, APN 247-150-63 for the 2-year extension on the tentative parcel map, site plan, and conditional use permit.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Was it Mark?
I picked Steve. No.
Okay, all those in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, the motion passes 5-0. Thank you.
Good luck to you, Mr. Wentworth.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda is application 20-734850 California Street. Applicant wants to extend, requesting approval of conditional use permit to allow the modular office building that is there now to remain on site for an additional 1-year period. Is there a staff report?
Yes, thank you. 850 California Street is a 34,920 square foot lot with a 3,092 square foot main building. The office use is currently identified as non-conforming as it is a commercial use operating on a lot zoned for low density residential, R1. Properties, just a little background refresher, that properties that become non-conforming because of either annexation, amendments to the zoning code, or a rezoning process. The original medical center office was permitted by the city back in 1963, and it appears to have continued to operate as a doctor's office ever since. The applicant contacted the city sometime in May and inquired about adding a modular building on site temporarily to serve as a patient segregation area for patients that may have been exposed to COVID-19. The applicant was looking to expedite the building permit and occupancy quickly, advising that it would be temporary. So the municipal code does allow or have a process for what's called a temporary use of land permit, or a TOLP. And we move forward with issuing that TOLP to get that building moving. TOLPs, in accordance with the municipal code, allow uses conducted on an intermittent or short-term basis, which is limited to 60 days with a 30-day extension for a total of 90 days. As staff had advised the applicant at that time that they could then decide whether they needed the building longer and which a use permit would be required. Staff reviewed the TOLP application and conditioned it accordingly to address specific concerns such as hours of operation, permits required, ADA regulations, utility connections, etc. The parking lot of this property is large enough to accommodate the temporary modular building, as well as provide adequate parking for both the main building and that temporary building, which included the main office. An additional ADA parking space with a loading zone and access ramps were required with issuance of the building permit on the temporary office building. The deadline of the TOLP is December 24th, 2020. Staff has incorporated the conditions of approval that were a part of that TOLP application into the conditions of approval on the conditional use permit. As previously discussed, the modular building is permitted, installed, and in operation. The use permit is required in order to extend the term of the temporary office building so that it can be located on site, and they are requesting an additional 1 year. The findings for the municipal code for use permits are A, that the use is necessary or desirable in relation to the purposes of the Escalon General Plan, this title, and the economic, social, and environmental status of the city. B, that the use will be properly related to other uses, transportation facilities, and other public facilities in the area and will not cause undue environmental impacts relating to noise, odor, pollution, etc. And C, that the use will not adversely affect the health or safety of persons living or working in the vicinity or be materially detrimental to the public welfare of the city and its residents. Regarding public outreach, we did publish our hearing notice, which appeared in the newspaper on November 25th. It was sent out to the property owner and occupant within 300 feet of the subject site. Staff did not receive any responses from the surrounding neighbors or community as a result of the notice. As an additional note, we also have not received any comments or correspondence regarding the building being there the last 3 months at all. Responses received by external public agencies are attached to the staff report and or incorporated into the conditions of approval on the project. As all projects, the schedule, it does begin a 10 business day appeal period, which commission's actions may be appealed, and that deadline would be 5 p.m. on December 31st, 2020. Staff reviewed the comments from all the agencies and put together the following items to serve as the proposed conditions of approval. Staff recommends that the Planning Commission review them. Pending any modifications, they may seek to include and or remove. So our recommendation is listed as opening and closing the public hearing after receiving any public testimony or comments, making those findings per the municipal code for conditional use permits, finding the project categorically exempt under section 15332 of the CEQA Class 3 infill development, and then approving the use permit application with the conditions of approval as proposed below or as modified by the Planning Commission. So if we go through those conditions of approval, the specific conditions were that this approval would run with the land, and it has been drafted at what the applicant was seeking, which was a additional 1 year period, which would end December 15, 2021. Then we have the conditional use permit validity, that if they wanted to modify or change it in any way, an amendment to this application would be needed. We do have the hours of operations listed, which were submitted by the applicant at the time that they move forward with the project, which are the regular business hours of Monday through Friday, 8 to 5 p.m., closed on the weekends. The other items, 4 through 10, were items that were all included on their conditions of approval for the building, which included electrical, plumbing, anything that was required for that building, receive its permits and be required per City of Escalon standards. Fire protection and fire vehicle access will be made as prescribed by the fire chief. Signage is limited to the city's sign ordinance. The building is modular, so it has tanks for both water and sewer that are serviced. And we did ask for a contract from that company as proof of having those things taken care of and cleaned on a regularly schedule. So the water and sewer holding tanks must be continuously maintained. And we do have that contract for their maintenance. And each outlet of the non-potable water line that is permitted to be used for drinking or domestic purposes shall be posted, caution, non-potable water, do not drink. An international symbol of glass in a circle with a slash through it shall be provided. That's per building code, California building code. And then within 3 days after removal of that temporary use, the site would be cleaned and free of all trash, debris, signs, temporary electrical service removed, etc. And then any additional limitations as imposed by the city planner as conditions of approval would be met. So most of these items have already been addressed when we issue that building permit, but because they would be the temporary use of land permit moving into use permit, we're just carrying them over knowing that they've already been applied. And then we have our standard conditions, which are mostly the conditions that follow forward with every project. And if the commission has any questions or any comments, I'd be happy to answer those.
Okay, so we'll entertain questions from the commissioners, and again, starting with Commissioner Castellanos. Do you have any questions of staff?
Yeah, I have one question. Yeah, the conditional use permit, the applicant's asking for a 1 year use permit. If we approve this, I mean, he could have asked for it to be 5 years or 10 years. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so in theory, if he needs this thing, hopefully not, for another year or two, he'd have to come back and do this whole process over again?
So if they wanted to have it additionally longer than that 1 year period, then they would file for an amendment. And so it would basically be a reapplication showing all of this information. We'd probably attach all of this from this meeting to a revised staff report and have them approve, move forward with an amendment to the use permit.
Okay. And then the other question is, if the applicant decided that they would like to use this structure for another use after a year, they have to come back in for a different conditional use permit?
So if the use, in their case, because they're a medical office, any use that they would have with that office will most likely be medical related. And if that's the case, it should be able to be processed under an amendment to the conditional use permit. But if they were to come and move forward and ask for a use permit and wanted to run a daycare facility, then obviously that's different. They'd need a separate use permit for that use. But as long as they stay with medical office, medical center, office related. It should just be another amendment if they decide to do something else with that building.
Okay, well, thank you for your answers.
No problem.
Commissioner Danziger, do you have questions of staff?
I was just curious as to regular drinking water. Is it plumbed into that building?
No, it is not.
So there's the non-potable water is for toiletry only, or what?
Correct.
Okay. Have they given you any indication of how many patients have been treated in there, in that temporary use?
No, they have not.
Well, must have been more than one if they're coming back. But I've driven out there and it looks fine to me. So that's all the questions I had.
And originally when we did this temporary land use permit, at that time, the applicant was still conflicted on whether or not they wanted to construct a building or put in an office. But they needed more time to kind of sort that out financially. So in the meanwhile, staff recommended that they do the temporary land use permit to get that going so that they could operate that facility. And they were also looking, there's another accessory building on site that's like a 1,200 square foot, it looks like a garage or a storage building. They were looking into possibly either renovating that building or remodeling it into another office or building a new building. And so this gave them some time too to figure out what they wanted to do. And I'm sure that that's probably still that case scenario in this year while they're working out of that modular building, kind of deciphering whether or not they want to build a new building or if they need something more long-term. And at that point too, that would be another amendment to the use permit. And then possibly site plan review for that building.
Anything else? Commissioner Sarkozy?
I would just say that just really appreciate all the work that businesses are doing to adapt and do things safely, and this is a perfect example of doing that. So kudos to the business in doing that. And then I guess my only comment would be on number 9 of the specific conditions. We're calling out for 3 days. I don't know, it just seems a little quick, especially with temporary electrical services. And if we're, if we're really not going to go out there within 3 days and check, maybe we should, maybe change that to a little more appropriate, just in case, for whatever reason, he can't line up a electrician to remove the electrical service. Just make it appropriate for what we might go out, what the city might go out and look for. And I guess if it's 3 days, then we keep it that, but it seems pretty quick to me. That's all I had.
Would you like me to update that to 14?
I think that would be great. Yeah.
A 10-day or a 14-day period.
Yeah. I think that would be better.
Okay. Is everyone in agreement to extend that from 3 days to 14 days?
I was gonna say 5, but yeah, 14, whatever we normally do.
Yeah, we're either 10 or 14 days. So.
Yeah, since we can't predict exactly what's gonna be going on at that time.
Okay, so we'll update that to 14 days. So if moving forward with this approval, we would just staff's recommendation and then as amended by the planning commission.
Anything else, Commissioner Sarkozy?
No, that's all I had. Thanks.
Commissioner Sherman?
So I'll be honest, I didn't have a chance to drive past the site. But question for staff on Exhibit B as in Bravo. Can you show me where the building is located?
Up there. It's pretty good.
So where, you can't see it, but where is it currently located on the site? Okay.
We have a picture. So the next exhibit on C, it has that building located on the site plan. So if you go back to Exhibit B, right on the side.
Is it right
Okay.
here?
Right in front of the tree.
Oh, it's along the trees, yeah. So it's right parallel or right next to that accessory building they have there. And so along that building, next to that building, they've also put the an extra ADA with loading space because the building code and ADA requirements require per building. So they need their own ADA space for that building.
So my only comments are, I want to kind of reiterate what Commissioner Sarkozy said. It's that I really appreciate Krishnamurthy Medical Group to be adaptable and really think of people's health, especially given this day or these days that we're dealing with one word of caution. And that is, I'm sure he or she is aware of the state organization called OSHPD. And OSHPD stands for the Office of Statewide Health Planning and Development. If you have never dealt with OSHPD, thank God, because it's been my experience that portable buildings such as these may not be considered a acceptable use for OSHPD for medical facilities. So I'm not throwing anyone under the bus. I just say use some extreme caution, because the last thing we want to do is have the applicant have this sitting out there and then come to find out there's an issue with OSHPD because this portable isn't an approved medical facility under their requirements. So nothing further.
Is there a representative of the applicant here tonight, either here or virtually?
They may be here virtually.
Possibly.
If not, I have a question for staff. It specifically says that the temporary building will serve as a patient segregation area for patients that may have been exposed. It doesn't say anything about testing. It doesn't say anything about being positive. It's just a segregation area. So what exactly will they be doing there? Will they be doing any medical work per se?
It sounds like anybody, it's our understanding of the project that anybody who contacts that doctor's office and says they're experiencing symptoms and they're related to COVID and they think that there's any relationship to it being COVID related, they're not going to be going into the main building. They'll be moved over to this building. Whether or not they're doing testing, I would assume so. If they're having the symptoms, I would assume they are doing the testing in that building. Because they're not allowing anybody COVID related into their main building.
And I was curious, why pick a year for the extension? I mean, what, have they got a crystal ball telling them that they're going to need it for a year? What are their thoughts? Did they express them to you?
No. Yeah, they just said 1 year. And maybe by then, maybe she's thinking that she'll end up either moving forward with that building or we've probably explained to them in the past that it could be extended again under another amendment. So maybe they're just taking it year by year and maybe doing some type of analysis later on. If you wanted to update that at the Planning Commission, you could update that. I mean, Diana and I kind of discussed about maybe moving forward with it as so long as we're in a pandemic, and it's called a pandemic. But yeah, we don't really know when that's ever going to change. We don't know if this is going to end up being 5 or 6 years. I mean, everything's kind of in the air. So I think that 1 year was just the first thing that they suggested.
I spoke with the applicant when they submitted at the counter, and I explained to her that, under a conditional use permit, you can ask for a year, you can ask for 2 years, 3 years, as long as you think you'll need. And they were fairly sure that they were not going to need longer than a year.
And at the time, we hadn't started vaccinations yet. Did they indicate that maybe this would be a site to give out vaccinations or?
No indication of that.
Okay, at this time, I'll open the public hearing. If anyone in the audience here would like to address this issue or anyone on the virtual site would like to address this issue, give your name and address and state your concern or ask your question. Hearing none, I'll close the public hearing and bring it back to the commission. Commissioner Castellanos, thoughts?
I mean, the existing use is already there. They're just extending another 24 or 12 months. I'm in favor of the extension.
Commissioner Danziger?
I have no problem extending this for a year. That seems like an adequate amount of time to really get under control with vaccinations and what have you. And hopefully we're in good shape and they won't need to come back.
Commissioner Sarkozy?
Yeah, I don't have anything to add besides what's already been said. Thanks.
Commissioner Stroman?
Nothing further.
Okay, do I hear a motion?
What's up with these guys? They're
No, sure. I'll make a motion that let's see here. Let me read it. Find the right page here. So I will make a motion to approve the 1-year conditional use permit and find that the project is applicable to Escalon Municipal Code 15 or 17.56, and I find that the project is CEQA Class 3, categorically exempt under Section 15332 infill development, and just the only minor change is changing the three days after removal to 14 days, item number 9 on the specific conditions.
Okay, well done. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. Motion passes 5-0. Okay, next, we have number 4, application 20-732 at 1455 First and 1463 Roosevelt. Applicant is Shanlar Enterprises, proposing to remodel existing buildings and phasing construction of future buildings to create leasable units. Is there a staff report, please?
Yes, thank you, Vice Chair Willis. So we saw a preview of this project about a year ago. The developer, Shanlar Enterprises LLC, Mr. Larry Grossi, stopped in with the Planning Commission and gave a presentation when they purchased the property, just kind of giving an overview of their vision for the site. And tonight we're going to go over the details. This is a site plan review. It's covering multiple parcels owned by Shanlar Enterprises, and these parcels are along First Street and Roosevelt Avenue, just west of the railroad tracks downtown. Shanlar Enterprises purchased these properties in 2019 from the longtime owners of the lumber yard, the Schmitz. And for clarity in our discussion tonight, because there are multiple buildings on the site, and just to keep everything clear, I've designated a north campus and a south campus, and all the buildings have been labeled with a letter, A through G.
Letter trail is getting technical.
The only way to keep track of the buildings, yeah.
Buckle up, folks. All right. So the developer has strived to keep the historical appearance of the former lumberyard office building through the remodel process. And you've seen that over the last several months. Not only are they remodeling the building, they're also going to be improving the surrounding site. The former lumberyard office is in the process of being converted into 4 leasable commercial suites. And you can see a floor plan on the screen. One of the suites is tentatively leased to a wine tasting business, and we will hear all about that on the next item on the agenda. Building B is the former wood molding warehouse. It has been demolished over the last week or so. You might have seen that if you've gone by. And a new commercial building is going to be located in its place with an east-west orientation. The developer hopes that a restaurant will locate in one of the suites and most likely retail shops or offices in the remaining ones. The proposed building's architecture is designed to complement the existing and surrounding buildings and maintain Escalon's downtown character. This is a conceptual sketch of what the building could possibly look like, but the design is not set in stone yet. Building C is a former storage building, and it is entering the remodel process. Improvements include the creation of leasable suites, and they will contain an office, a bathroom, and supplemental storage space. Exterior facade improvements include stone wainscoting, installation of roll-up doors, awnings over the man doors, and light fixtures. One of the suites is tentatively leased to a dirt bike ATV retail sales business. That also will be heard on the next item on the agenda. And the other suites in the building are tentatively leased to a local HVAC contracting company. Building D, there was they called it the Glass House, a former building called the Glass House. And that has been demolished. There it is in the back. So that has been removed, and the developer intends to construct a new building in its place. That also, like building C, has office, bathroom, and supplemental storage. And this building will look similar to building C. It'll have the stone wainscoting, the roll-up doors, awnings, and light fixtures.
As you go through this, can I just ask a general question?
Sure.
Did you put together this presentation or did the applicant?
The PowerPoint? I put it together.
It rocks.
Thanks.
You're hired.
Very easy to follow.
The city entered into an agreement to sell the former Prospect area to the developer on the condition that the developer fully improves the parcels and a portion of it become a public parking lot. The developer agreed to deed restrict a portion of the property that will be built and used for public parking spaces. This will help provide off-street parking for the customers of the surrounding businesses, alleviating on-street congestion in the area. A walkway from the parking spaces out to First Street will be provided. While all the parking spaces are deed restricted for public use, the developer does get an 8-space credit towards their parking requirements. There's a landscape planter along the south end of the parking lot. This planter could possibly be converted to an extra parking space. And while setting the conditions of approval for the project at the end of the presentation, staff would like some direction from Planning Commission whether you would rather see this area remain landscaping or would you rather see an extra parking space. Originally, discussions between staff and the developer, we explained about the 5-foot landscape strip along property lines, so they included that to meet the code. But staff goes back and forth. Do we want the landscaping? Do we want the parking? Because we know parking is such an issue.
It's on Roosevelt.
On Roosevelt, yep, it would be directly on Roosevelt. So Planning Commission can have some discussion on that at the end of the presentation and decide landscaping or parking. So on North Campus, site improvements include underground utilities, grading, and paved parking lots. Curb, gutter, and sidewalk are going to be installed along First Street as well as on Roosevelt Avenue. The North Campus will be all one parcel after the developer does a merger. So all the buildings on North Campus can share parking spaces. So based on the tentative uses of the buildings and their sizes, 52 parking spaces are required for North Campus. The developer currently has 24 spaces accounted for on the site plan, and they are working with their engineer to create more spaces. They've indicated that there could possibly be more parking spaces along the rear of Building B. Building D could possibly be reduced in size so that parking spaces could be included along there. There's also an option to reduce the size of Building B. And when you reduce the size of the building, less parking spaces are required because parking spaces are based on square footage. So the developer is working with their engineer to find those additional parking spaces. And staff will continue to work with the developer to make sure that those are provided. All access points to the property are two-way, in and out, with the exception on the southwest side. Where's my arrow? This area between the building and the property line was too narrow for a two-way in and out, so it is an exit only. And there is a sufficient size to meet the requirements for an exit only. The developer is overcoming challenges on this site in order to work around existing buildings to construct parking lots, drive aisles, and landscape planters, all the while trying to incorporate as much parking and landscaping as possible. Staff recommends Planning Commission authorize a reduction in landscaping as seen on the site plan. So all the green areas are where they're proposing landscaping. North Campus currently meets the required 10% landscaping coverage set by the municipal code, but in some areas, additional landscaping, such as like this border around the back, the code says it needs to be a 5-foot wide landscape planter. But if they did a 5-foot wide landscape planter, then there is not sufficient for space for a drive aisle. It's just too constricted between the property line and the building. So staff is requesting that Planning Commission authorize a reduction on some of those landscaping requirements to accommodate drive aisles and parking. If Planning Commission authorizes the reduction in landscaping width, staff will continue to work with the developer to incorporate as much landscaping as possible and retaining safe drive aisle and parking areas. Currently, their landscaping's at 12%, so they went over the minimum 10. This is a phased project. Phase 1 includes all of the site work, Building A and Building C with an estimated completion of 2021, spring of 2021, which is coming up quick. Phase 2 is Building B with an estimated completion of 2022 to 2024. Phase 3 would be completed 2024, 2025, and that's Building D. So the entire North Campus has an estimated completion date of 2025. All right, now we'll move over to South Campus, which is down there. Changes can already be seen on South Campus with Building E. It used to be a former storage building that was removed and replaced with a larger office with supplemental storage building. That looks like that. This building is currently being used by Escalon Lumber, who's operating out of the mill building. Although this building is not quite finished yet, Building E sets a really good example of what the other office supplemental storage buildings are going to look like. It is almost completed. They will have awnings over the man doors. But this is what the other buildings, C, D, and other ones on South Campus will look like. Escalon Lumber has a 10-year lease to operate out of the mill building, which is Building F. Once the lease is up, the developer plans to remove the existing building and construct a new building a bit farther back on the property to be used for offices with supplemental storage. Building G is just a storage building currently. It will also be removed and replaced with an office and supplemental storage building similar in design to Building E. Site improvements on South Campus are similar to those on North Campus. Grading, underground utilities, paved parking lots, curb gutter sidewalk, and landscaping. The proposed uses and sizes of the building require South Campus to provide 14 parking spaces, and the developer has created 22 parking spaces, so they are over their parking requirements. As with North Campus, the developer has met the minimum 10% landscaping. They're currently at 16. However, due to constraints in meeting drive aisle and parking stall size requirements, some landscape borders just cannot meet the 5-foot width requirement. And staff will continue to work with the developer to maximize landscaping while keeping those safe drive aisle and parking widths. But just like North Campus, we're asking Planning Commission to authorize a reduction in those landscape requirements. South Campus also is phased. There we go. Phase 1 of the project includes Building E and its site work with an estimated completion in early 2021. Phase 2 includes Building G and its site work, estimated completion 2024-2025. And Phase 3 includes Building F and its site work. And Phase 3 is not able to start until the current lease is up and the building is unoccupied. And we know that that lease is up in 2029. So with the exception of Building F, North and South campuses are anticipated to be completed by 2025. Phase 3, it cannot start until 2029 or 2030. Typically, projects expire when there's no activity for 2 years. So between 2025 and 2029, typically this project would lapse and the developer would have to come back and ask for a new site plan review. But since the schedule is already known, staff's recommending Planning Commission extend the expiration of the site approval for Phase 3 of the project until October 17th, 2030. That would give the developer 1 year from the building becoming vacant to start Phase 3 of the construction. Now, if the construction of Phase 3 doesn't start by the end of that extended deadline, then they would have to come back for a site plan review for their Phase 3. Staff has reviewed the project and find that it complies with the design elements for site and architecture in the municipal code, as well as the general plan. The project is also consistent with the goals and policies in the general plan. The developer has planned the site so that retail, personal service, restaurant, and other foot traffic businesses are going to fall along First Street. And then the office businesses are going to locate off of Roosevelt. Let me switch over to a different packet. All right. I'm on page 9 of the staff report, public outreach. Staff conducted the appropriate public outreach for this project. We published a newspaper ad on November 25th in the Escalon Times. We also mailed that public hearing notice to every property owner and occupant within 300 feet. And we did not receive any calls, emails, questions, comments, concerns from the public on this project. Planning Commission's decision tonight begins a 10 business day appeal period, which expires December 31st. Staff recommends approval of the project, and in order for Planning Commission to approve the application, they would open the public hearing and take any public comments, close the public hearing, make the findings for section 17.54 when it comes to site and architecture, find the project CEQA exempt under the sections on number 4 on page 10, and approve the application with the conditions of approval as proposed below or as modified by the Planning Commission. I'm not going to go through all of the conditions of approval. A lot of these are included by the city engineer, and they are included in there as good direction for the applicant's engineer on what he wants to see on the civil plans. So a lot of these we don't need to go through. We will go over number 1, approval. So this site and architecture approval, it's as described in the staff report, the conditions of approval, the plans that you've seen. It runs with the land, it's subsequent and binding on subsequent owners. If the project is significantly modified as determined by the city planner, then an amendment is required to come back to Planning Commission. Obviously, with a project this big and with a schedule out to 2025 or even out to 2030, some modifications are going to need to be made. We know that there's some fluctuating items with the landscaping, so staff is asking for some of those minor things to be able to be taken care of at staff level. But if the planning commissioner decides that the developer is making a significant change, then we would bring it back to Planning Commission for an amendment. And as part of the approval, the Mill Building F, we talked about that phase 3 on South Campus, that have an expiration date of 10/17/2030. And some things that we need Planning Commission to discuss, that parking stall versus landscape area on the prospect. And then if we could add in number 1, approval, authorizing the reduction in landscaping. I forgot to include that specific wording in there. So that is it for the staff report. If you have any questions for staff, and when you open the public hearing, the developer is here also, so they're available to answer any questions you may have.
You are on Santa's nice list.
Thank you.
In the conditions of approval, show paving limits, number 10. What exactly does that mean? Show paving limits?
Paving limits, so on the civil plan that is turned in, any areas that are going to receive payment, it's just a delineating line at the border to show where pavement ends.
So like where the flower beds start, or where the sidewalk starts, or?
All of it.
All of it?
All
Okay.
of it. Mm-hmm.
Okay. I could ask this of the applicant perhaps, but has the Azores Band Hall had any input or been asked about parking and sharing the parking lot and whatnot, because they do that now?
So when it came to the Prospect area, and the city was starting to go into negotiations and agreements for that Prospect area, those businesses in the area received multiple notices that this is what's happening, this is what we're looking at doing. So there were some discussions at that time. We sent the project public hearing notice to everybody within 300 feet, and we did not receive any calls or comments, concerns.
And as far as parking, I know where policy is to not tie in parking with the use of a building because the use can change over time. But my concern was if there's a restaurant in B, is that ample parking for a restaurant? Does the city feel that there's ample parking if there's a restaurant in building B?
Right, and so staff sat down with the applicant and we talked about those potential uses. And as you can see, the building A and building B, those were calculated at a higher parking rate. So the 52 parking spaces includes the restaurant, includes retail shops, includes offices. Buildings C, D, E, F, and G, those have minimal office area and more of a storage area for those offices. And so those parking requirements were calculated at the different rate, the lower rate for those buildings. And we've had conversations with the developer that you do sort of lock yourself in because we are calculating your parking needs based on these uses you're anticipating. And so in the future, if you have an applicant that say is retail and needs more parking, they might not be able to go in these certain suites because they were calculated at a lower rate. Unless you're able to find more parking somewhere and add it in, then you can make that change in use. But to answer your question, yes, building B can accommodate a restaurant for parking.
Okay, the building elevation for building B that's facing building A, it's on the north side?
Correct.
Okay, just to verify.
Mm-hmm.
And when it comes to like the 5-foot strip, didn't we vary that like with Dollar Tree or Dollar General or something, or maybe 2 feet of planting, maybe something on a trellis instead of the?
Dollar General, yes. And Referral Auto recently also had the reduced landscaping.
What?
Referral Auto?
Oh, okay,
Mhm.
okay,
Yes, it has been done before.
okay. So planning commissioners, if you have questions for staff, we'll start with Chairman Castellanos.
Yeah, of course I do. I have a question on the space between C and D. I was wondering of getting another access point between those buildings onto Roosevelt.
It's going to take a long time. Yes, there is a driveway between buildings C and D.
Okay, so, and then I was wondering that on a day like when it rains a lot, if somebody is going into building D and they park their car on one of these existing spaces, they have a truck, pretty long walk to get into that space. Is there any thought on maybe having some parking allocated between D and the buildings D and C?
So because this is all one lot, it's not required that they have parking directly adjacent to their building. It's certainly something that you can ask the applicant during public comment if that's something that they've considered or something that they would like to do.
Well, I would think it'd make the building more marketable for either the employees or the customers. On, you know, it's not very close. It'd be like walk, you know, anyway. Those are my two comments at this point in time.
Thank you.
Commissioner Sarkozy?
Hi. First of all, kudos, Diana. Very, very clear and easy to follow presentation. So thank you very much for that. I did have a question on, I guess it's the South Campus, E, F, and G. On one of the slides you showed, I think it was the grading plan, or maybe it was the landscaping plan. The next one with the purple on it. Yeah, I'm just wondering if that strip along Roosevelt that is in front of E and G can be done with the phase it's in, versus waiting all the way till 2030, 2031 to get that whole side of the street improved.
I'll have to clarify with the applicant, maybe during public hearing section. So curb gutter sidewalk is already on phase one. So my description here, my color chart here is not accurate because curb gutter sidewalk is already installed along phase one. I was thinking maybe phase two was going to have curb gutter sidewalk at that time too. Maybe it was just the middle section with phase three that isn't done. But Roosevelt Avenue along this section is going to be repaved, the south half of the street, because it's been cut into for access to utilities. The paving of the street is not going to be required until 2030. But I think your curb gutter sidewalk is going with each of the phases.
Okay, good. I guess I would also just add, wow, that looks great. It's exciting for the city. It's a good plan. It sounds like parking on the other side of the street is going to be a challenge to get the number required, but I'm sure it'll all get worked out, and you guys will help them out. So I appreciate all the work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Danziger?
Thank you, Chair. I have a couple of questions. Number one, to Diane and Dominique, did the fire department make any comments about fire suppression systems, hydrants, anything like that?
Yeah, we had conversations with fire department throughout the review of the site. They are not requiring any hydrants on site. They do have hydrants on Roosevelt and they have hydrants on First Street, and they said that that would be sufficient. When it comes to fire sprinklers, that is just going to depend on the size of the building and the use in the building. I believe all the buildings on site are small enough to not require fire sprinklers, except possibly building B. But I think there are discussions going on about maybe reducing the size of building B to bring it under the threshold for fire sprinklers. There may be requirements for fire separation between the units, but that is just going to be when a tenant goes in, it's evaluated by the building official about the type of use and what is the adjacent use to it, and fire separation wall may be required, but fire sprinklers, very, very unlikely.
Yeah, well, I was actually just commenting about hydrants there and what the fire protection engineer might have a comment about that. Can you put up the traffic flow? I don't know if I saw that before.
The in and out?
It's a one-way traffic flow, right? From Roosevelt out to 8th Street.
So the blue squares are two-way, in and out. And then the red one is exit only.
Okay, all right, that makes a lot more sense to me. I'm with staff's recommendation on the planter. I think we need more parking than that, the planter. I was curious about the sale of the Prospect Road. Just for my own information, I had spoken to one of the tenants on First Street there, and they were upset because they didn't have side access off of Prospect there. Were all of those tenants offered the ability to buy in?
No, they weren't.
And were they consulted prior to the sale that they were going to be blocked off from side access?
We did share with all of the surrounding businesses the proposed plan.
And they aren't blocked off. They are given a walkway. So there's the parking area, and then there's a walkway that connects the parking to First Street frontage. So they have access to park in the parking lot and walk to First Street.
Yeah, well, I'm not talking about the parking. There was a access point for the transmission shop along Prospect where they brought in larger, like RVs and things. And now that just can't happen because you've got it all walled up. Right?
There's access from Center Street, isn't there?
Yes, he does have access from Center.
I just don't.
You say no?
I didn't say that.
Mr. Strowman?
So just an overall comment, maybe this is more for the applicant. I mean, it's definitely well thought out. And I can say for certain that Chandler is not really messing around. But one thing that, and it sounds crazy, it's probably, where did you come up with this stuff? But I see no garbage access, no dumpster plan, no garbage enclosures, no anything. So where are they, how are they going to handle trash pickup?
Staff is in discussions with the developer and Jilton for placement, ideal placement of trash enclosures. And it's a condition of approval. They do have to have multiple trash enclosures on North Campus and South Campus. So those details haven't been finalized yet, but it's a requirement.
Okay, I was like, yeah, great buildings, but where's the trash going? Has the fire department made any comments regarding drive aisle access and the turning radius is required for a fire engine?
We discussed that with them and they did not have any concerns.
Okay.
Wow.
Nothing further. My only other question is going to be for the applicant.
Was there something else, Chair Castellanos or Commissioner Danziger?
No,
Okay. Okay,
Um,
we will,
I'll save mine to the applicant.
okay. We
Could
will,
I add one more thing?
Yes, go ahead.
Commissioner Willis. So a little clarification on Commissioner Danzinger's question about traffic flow. It looks like on the upper left-hand corner of building B, there's parking where I guess, yeah, right there. So I'm assuming that kind of the right-hand side of this parcel really, at least is the way it's proposed here, does not have through traffic to the left-hand side of the parcel. Is that correct?
You are reading the plan correctly. It does show that there are parking spaces here, but in a subsequent revision, there are not parking spaces. This is going to be through. There will not be parking spaces here.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Okay, in that case, I'll open up the public hearing. If the applicant is present or anyone else who'd like to address this issue, step up, give your name and address. And
Hello, Larry Grossi, 1455 First Street. I'm just here to answer any questions.
I realize some of these are warehouse buildings, but I don't see bathrooms in all of them. Does that make sense not to have bathrooms in a warehouse?
We're in the process of doing the building C is going through tentative improvement. And there are bathrooms and offices in C. There's actually 3 separate units there.
But not E, or I guess I don't see D.
E is also set up with bathrooms. They're not right now. They're not built, but they are stepped in. All of them eventually will have them. It's just that we don't show them in that particular plan.
Have you had contact with the Azores Band Hall about their need for parking, or?
We've been there now over a year and a half. And I have not had any contact with anybody from the.
Well, they're probably not having any events or anything right now either, so maybe later. Chair Castellanos, do you have any questions of the applicant?
no,
Commissioner Danziger, do you have questions of the applicant?
Just one. I know there's going to be parking agreements between all of the buildings there on the North Campus. During events, will all of that parking be available to people that aren't employed or working in those areas? Citizenry here in Escalon?
What was the question?
Will the parking be available to people who are not using your businesses? Should there be an event downtown, or say at a neighboring church or something?
The highlighted area would be available for parking. The other areas, I guess, it would just depend on the businesses that are there, if they're open or not. I mean, they're going to have customers that are needing parking spaces. So I guess it would just depend on the time of day.
Will there be signage that limits general public parking during certain times so there's no confusion?
Absolutely.
Anything else?
I didn't even hear that, but no, that was what my comments were.
Commissioner Sarkozy?
Again, just reiterate, love the plan, love the details of it. Keeping with the red theme of the old building there, building A is really a nice touch. So Mr. Grassi, certainly appreciate all the work you're doing for the city, and very excited about it.
Thank you.
Commissioner Sterling, you have anything?
Yeah, so here's another left field one. Out of respect and out of a way to bring the past business of the lumberyard to your project, I would just like to make a request to see if you could install window grids inside the window glazing. Because in looking at all the other windows during the lumberyard, they all have interior grids. And so I didn't know what your thoughts are on that.
Of the windows,
So if you look at staff, could you go to the site photographs for building F? I don't think it's in the PowerPoint. It's exhibit F.
Which building?
Building F.
Building F?
Yes.
The lumber store itself.
The mill.
Building A.
Too far.
yeah,
Okay, so see how the windows have grids in them?
well, those were the shelving that was in the windows that they had along all of that frontage. They were basically 18-inch wide shelves that they had to put their product on.
So what are the vertical mullions?
Okay, on which building? Because are you looking on the screen? Because I thought you, I thought you were.
Oh, on the building,
Yes, I'm looking at building.
yeah, that's the mill.
So see those grids?
Yeah, that's just the type of windows that they were. They're pane windows.
Right, and so what I'm asking for is, as a nod to that business, can you install those same grids in your windows to carry what used to be to what is the current?
Is that for the building F you're required or you're referring to?
I think it's a little too late to include them on building A because you already have all that glass installed. So just anything that faces the street. So
Which would be the building that's right next to
right
that.
now we have, or just trying to find a way to take what the original architectural, the aesthetic look of the lumber yard and bringing it forward to your project.
Which we could probably do it to E, which is the building that we just in the process of getting completed. There could probably be a grid put into that front window, just to kind of carry that across.
So I would make well, and if you have anything that, in building B, along the, I mean, there's no sense in putting window grids in windows that don't face the street.
Right. I think building A, the whole idea of building A, why it had the windows it had was just to show off the product that they had. And they had shelving there to show that off. We went back to keep those same windows, other than their up-to-date windows, to show what's in the building. So I think putting grids on that wouldn't.
No, that's what I said, building A.
Okay.
Maybe for building B.
And G. And maybe B, depending on how that works out.
B is in Bravo. Maybe decide for C and D that face Roosevelt. Definitely F. Then the frontage along Roosevelt on E and G. Just to try to find a way to bring what was to what's current.
Yeah.
You want to make that a condition or is it just a personal preference?
I would like to make it a condition.
Okay.
Other than that, if the rest of the project goes the way that you have done building A so far and the way that you demolished building B, quote, city planner Trano, buckle up, Buttercup, because we're going for a ride. You're not messing around, and I mean, the project itself is very exciting for the city. I think that my ears perked up, because that's the one thing I always hear people complain about. We need a good restaurant. So, just my thoughts. I think you're doing a great job.
Thank you.
And so keep it up.
Thanks.
I was saddened, the pad where the first switchboard was, the first post office, I was very sad to see that area kind of go by the wayside. And
We asked the Historical Society if they wanted it. We would have gladly moved it over there for them.
well, no place to put it, but, and the building, you know, Irwin lumber, and then Moorhead lumber, and then S1 lumber, there is a lot of history, and I do appreciate the fact that you preserved the flavor of the building, the color scheme and all that, and the rest of this looks nice, even with the brick or the stone wainscoting, I can handle that, but it is a nice presentation. I hope there aren't any stumbling blocks, you know, for you to reach fruition. Is there anybody else virtually who would like to ask questions of the applicant?
Yes, this is Dave Bellinger, 1420 Winterbrook again. The question for the developer, how many existing buildings do you have up? You've got A, retrofitted, you've got E up. Are any of the other buildings up with windows without grids? I'm just concerned that we're now putting a condition on a developer that he's already got some buildings up without grids, and now we're asking them to put windows in with grids, and now we're gonna have mismatched buildings throughout his project. Why would we do that to the developer?
Well, we haven't voted on that yet. We don't know that we're going to ask him to do that yet.
May I respond?
Okay.
Mr. Bellinger, so I don't know how well versed you are with glazing for windows, but they can pop off the vinyl fin, pop out the window, put in a piece with grid, doesn't affect the warranty. So it's, but my condition was not necessarily, didn't have anything to do with building A. It was more so for the buildings that are planned, as well as the building, just the windows facing Roosevelt on buildings G, F, E, C, and D as in dog. So those were my only thoughts.
Okay.
It looks like there might be here on the elevation for B. Is that a window?
Which one, B?
On B, the elevation for building B, on the far left, is that a gridded window? Or is that a?
Are you talking right here?
Oh, well, yeah, that was just a concept that our engineer had put together. If you look along where the transmission shop and the beauty shop is, that theme or that old town look, even if you look on Main Street, how that looks, that's what we want to try to envision, to see that is as you come around that corner, it just, the beauty shop, transmission shop just kind of continues, even though it's offset back a little bit, just to kind of keep that look of town.
Well, and the doors almost look like a nod to, say, the barn doors on the mill, although these aren't going to be barn doors, but they're going to maybe have a historical flavor.
Yeah.
I don't know that I want to put a condition in. I might just ask the applicant to give a thought to, but we'll see what everybody else thinks too. Any other comments from virtual participants for the applicant? Okay, hearing none. Thank you, Mr. Grassi.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else in the present who would like to step up to the podium and say anything? Okay, seeing no one, we'll close the public hearing and bring it back to the commission. We've got a couple of things to to discuss that aren't in the plan. And that's whether we want them to put that parking spot in along Roosevelt or have it be landscaping, whether we want to change the depth of the landscaping along the edges, along the masonry walls. Also, whether we want to put in a condition about the windows. Were there other things that we wanted to change?
Those are the three things that I have.
Okay. So input, Chair Castellanos? Is he still here?
I'm still here. Let somebody else speak first. I'm just kind of thinking right now.
Okay, Commissioner Danziger.
I wouldn't want to interrupt his thinking. I'm fine with the planter along the side.
You want to keep it, or you want to make it a parking spot?
No, I want to make it parking. We need the parking.
Okay.
It's not a big enough issue to require that versus the parking. So I'm in favor of that, especially in that area. And we've talked about it with Mr. Frecking's place too, that the parking is a premium down there. So I don't think the planter is a big issue. Along that 5-foot path there, I'm with Commissioner Willis. If you could put up a trellis without impeding on the current drive-through, I think that should be something, because in a future date, when we get to the next one, there's going to be outdoor wine tasting and shootery or whatever they call it, and it might be nice to have that blocked up a little bit. And I know you can't put the trees out there, but maybe some kind of trellis, that would be something I'd be in favor of. I'm not in favor of changing any of the windows. I don't have a problem with the way they look. So those would be my comments. And by the way, I want to thank staff who's done a really good job on this, and Mr. Grassi too, because I think it's going to look really good.
Thank you. Commissioner Sarkozy.
Similar comments. I think parking is the important thing, so I'm fine with doing away with the planter, and the landscaping, with what staff suggests on, I guess, reducing the 5-foot limit. I'm fine with that. And then with the windows, I'm thinking, not making it a condition. Mr. Grassi certainly has a good plan, and I think he will do what's best, and that's probably a real small item. And I think he certainly is already showing great concern for the history of the area. So that's all I had at this point.
Okay, Chair Castellanos, are you done thinking?
I have some thoughts.
Okay.
Parking seems to be an issue throughout our community. So whatever we can do to increase parking, I think, is a positive thing. Landscaping, I don't know if we got to go to great extent to put landscaping in where it's not going to be visible. I would favor on putting in as much bling as we can along First Street, because when you turn down First Street, what the first thing you look at is the old lumberyard building. So the more we can spruce up what that looks like, I think the better. And, hats off to Mr. Grassi. When this project gets finished, I think this is going to be a real feather in our cap, because this could be something really nice that I think we're desperate to get some stuff that hopefully it'll have some synergy on Main Street. People start spending some money to get those buildings looking good, because, that's what I'm thinking.
And what about the gridded windows?
Parking's the issue, I think. So the more spaces we can get, the better.
What are your thoughts on the windows?
Well, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. It's been my philosophy. So, I mean, if as long as the buildings look appealing, I mean, that's, I think that's the goal of the developer is, I mean, I think consistency on the look is important. So if whatever we do to A should look similar to B and C and D and E and F and G, so, I mean, consistency is what I'm looking for. So, that's, so.
Anything else?
No.
I just have a question for staff. So the northern property line, the northwest property line on building A is from that property line to the tracks. Is that property owned by Union Pacific?
No, this,
Burlington Northern, I'm sorry, yeah.
can you see my arrow?
Yes.
So this property, section of property here belongs to the people who own this section back here.
The trucking, storage or whatever?
Correct. And there, I mean, eventually you do get into BNSF property because the tracks are right here. But this is kind of like a little flag lot that goes like that.
So how do you feel about that parking strip on Roosevelt? Parking or landscape?
Parking.
Okay, and a 5-foot strip or something different or less?
I think we should go with staff's recommendation to, because as the other commissioners noted, I mean, parking is definitely going to be a premium, especially if by chance we get a little restaurant involved. So
What about the landscaping here?
I think that's reducing that is
Okay.
acceptable.
And then the gridded windows?
I'm for them, but it sounds like that's going to die on the vine.
All right. Well, trees and plants are aesthetically pleasing, but parking to me is money. So a parking space outweighs landscaping as far as that strip there on Roosevelt. So that puts 5 of us in favor of that parking spot. And as far as the planting along the eastern edge, does it make sense to just have 2 feet? Does it make sense to have wells with a trellis with something coming out, or is that too hard to irrigate? What, just drop the 5 to 3 or 2?
If planning commission would just authorize a reduction
Just a
for
reduction?
staff to work with the
Okay,
applicant.
okay.
Like I said, we're going to work to get as much as we can, but we're putting parking at a premium, and then we have to meet the drive aisle width. So I think currently this strip is at 18 inches.
Oh, okay.
But I wouldn't want planning commission to set a number in case that has to change because the site plan isn't 100% finalized yet. So just authorizing the reduction in landscaping.
You got to think of safety, and then when it comes to the wine tasting in the restaurant, you want aesthetically pleasing, but of course that's way over in building B and not over there where you're driving out. So yeah, if we could reduce the planting and still have it be aesthetically pleasing, that would be nice. And then it doesn't sound like the windows are need to be a condition of this. Mr. Grassi sounds like he's got an eye for historical, a nod to the historical aspect of the original buildings and whatnot. So,
Vice Chair, can I make a comment on something staff just said?
sure.
So that northwest side, you said that little planter area is 18 inches.
Correct.
That's a whole lot of work for an 18-inch planter bed. So,
Just to be clear, you're saying northwest, but you mean northeast?
yes, northeast.
Okay.
Sorry,
No, that's okay. I just want to make sure I know.
that area, I mean, if we're talking an 18-inch planter bed, that just seems like a whole lot of work to force the applicant to try to do a planter bed that's literally that big. So I think, I agree with you. I don't think we should necessarily put a limit on it. But we also want to have something beautified. But I mean, an 18-inch planter bed, it just kind of.
Well, so leave it to staff to.
Yeah.
Yeah, discretion to reduce it, whatever is appropriate.
Right.
Whatever they can agree on, okay.
Obviously, we would like something there to soften it up, because you don't want to be driving out looking at a train. So,
Well, there's gonna be a wall. Okay, is there anybody else who wanted to speak on this issue? Did I close the public hearing? I did, didn't I? Okay. In that case, I'm open to a motion on this issue. Commissioners?
I make a motion that we approve this project, and let me get back to the beginning here and move on staff's recommendation. Let's see, we make the findings as required for section 1754, site and architectural review. Find that the project CEQA Class 1 categorically exempt under section 15301A, existing facilities with interior or exterior alterations. 15302B, replacement of commercial structure with new structure of substantially the same size, purpose and capacity. And 15332, infill, and authorize staff to file a CEQA notice of exemption. Would also like to amend any requirements for a planter on Roosevelt, make that parking. Approve staff to work with the applicant for landscaping and the requirement there.
Okay,
Approve all
is there a
other-
second on that motion?
I'll second.
Thank you. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed, say nay. Okay, motion passes 5-0. Thank you, everybody.
A plus on that motion, Kurt. Good job.
Okay.
As good as the PowerPoint.
Number 5, application 20-733 at the same addresses. And this is requesting approval of a conditional use permit for the leasable spaces to allow several types of businesses and tenants, including wine tasting, artisan beverage makers, brewery, tap or tasting room, motorcycle, ATV, scooter sales and service, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, staff report, please.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Yes, and I'm going to cheat and reuse some of this PowerPoint. Yes, so in the last item, we dealt with the site, the parking, the landscaping, the buildings. This item 733 is a conditional use permit that's going to deal with the uses and the types of businesses that are going to be able to locate here. So as we talked about, the developer has oriented retail, restaurant, office uses in buildings A and B, and then C, D, E, F, and G are going to be offices with some supplemental storage. We have already had proposed tenants contacting the city, asking about what kind of planning processes are required for my business to locate here. What do we need to do for business licenses? So even though we're looking at early spring for businesses to be able to move in, we are already receiving calls of people interested in locating on this campus. Because there were several businesses looking to locate here that needed conditional use permits, the developer decided to apply for a conditional use permit to encompass those businesses. So each business is not having to come individually. We know what some businesses are going to be and what potential businesses they want to come there. And so this is a bit of a blanket conditional use permit to include several types of businesses. That way it's easier to attract businesses quicker for them to move in. So one potential tenant is D&M Wines, and they're going to be doing business as Lumberyard Sellers. And I just have to say, I really, really love that name. Very cute. And they are looking to locate in Building A. They are going to operate where's the site plan? There we go. A wine bar. And they would be in this unit closest to the tracks. And their business operations would include wine tasting, wine sales. They would have a wine club, hold events in their suite, and do appetizer boards. Due to COVID, when they're allowed to open, we don't know exactly what those business hours will look like. It's just uncertain as of now. But under normal circumstances, they would like to start with a Friday through Sunday opening from 12 to 8. And then as patronage grows, they would expand to include weekdays and maybe some extended hours. I'm just going to use the mouse. This area right here, it shows it's parking stalls, but it's not parking stalls. It's going to be a paved patio area. And this is at the rear of the building, and it's designed for tables and chairs. This will help the business with COVID. Obviously, we all know about outdoor dining, but it's a nice amenity, and they're going to keep it permanently after COVID. Alcohol beverage control requires wherever you serve alcohol to be barriered off to separate it from areas where alcohol cannot be served. And so they would put some sort of aesthetic barrier, low fencing with some planters around the outer edge just to have that separation. And staff recommends approval of this business in this location. Another potential tenant is looking to open an ATV dirt bike sales and service shop. This would be TPG Motorsports. And they are looking to locate in Building C, one of the suites in here. And I think it was the one closest to Roosevelt Street. This business would initially start buying and selling new and used dirt bikes, ATVs, scooters, motorcycles. They'd also sell parts and accessories for those vehicles and other four-wheel drive vehicles such as Jeeps. Occasionally, they might purchase a vehicle to sell from auction. They would clean and detail the vehicle, and that might happen on site, but if it was something that needed major service or body work, they would outsource that to other local businesses in Escalon. Eventually, the business would like to offer service and repair for dirt bikes, ATVs, scooters, and motorcycles, and all the services that they feel they would perform on these vehicles would categorize under minor services. And minor services is a term defined in the municipal code. And it includes things like tune-ups, work to the cooling system, brakes, wheels, electrical, minor items to the fuel system and exhaust system. And staff recommends approval of this use at this location. So those are the two businesses needing conditional use permits that are defined. We know who they are and what they want to do. The developer has asked that other types of business on our list of permitted uses that need conditional use permits be approved as well as a general category. And that includes tap or tasting rooms. So they would be something similar to lumberyard cellars, and staff recommends approval of this use in this location. And that would be for, it could be for any of the buildings, but they would see this type of use in building A or B. Restaurants over 40 seats require conditional use permits. We know that the developer is hoping to get something like that in building B. The parking is already accommodated for that, and staff would recommend approval of that at this location. Paint supplies, janitorial services. This would be like kind of like a Kelly Moore type of paint store, sell paint, painting supplies. Janitorial services would probably be more in the office area where it's a janitorial office, and then they store their toilet paper, paper towels, hand sanitizer, stuff like that. And staff recommends approval of this use at this location. Other areas, categories of type of business: farm equipment, marine, boat, motor vehicle, tire, equipment, and machinery sales and services. So staff would recommend approval of those items for sale, and we would recommend approval of minor services to those items. But if the business wants to do major repair to those types of vehicles, and major repair is defined on page 4, so this is where you get more into the dismantling of engines, dismantling of the vehicles, cylinder head replacement, valve grinding, clutch replacement, replacing transmissions, body work, engine or transmission removal, radiator heater core replacement, painting. If any of those major services are being proposed by the business, Staff's recommending that they get their own individual conditional use permit, come to Planning Commission with specific information about their business so they can be individually evaluated. So staff recommends approval of sales and minor services, but if they are going to be doing the major work, then they come back and get their own individual conditional use permit. The developer requested under the conditional use permit to include limited manufacturing. We don't recommend approval of this use with this use permit, but if someone who wants to do minor manufacturing come back with their own use permit with the specific details of what they want to manufacture, how much noise they make, hours of operation, and Planning Commission can evaluate that on an individual basis. Same thing with artisan beverage makers and breweries. We don't recommend approval under this use permit, but that they apply for a specific conditional use permit to be individually evaluated for those same reasons. What are your hours of operation? How much noise do your machines make? In order for this conditional use permit to be approved, it has to meet the municipal code findings for use permits, which are listed below. Staff conducted the appropriate public outreach for the conditional use permit. Public hearing notice was published in the Escalon Times on November 25th, and a public hearing notice was sent to all property owners and occupants within 300 feet of the site, and staff did not receive any comments or concerns from the public as a result of that. Planning Commission's decision tonight starts a 10 business day appeal period, which expires December 31st. Staff's recommendation was included next to all of those, whether we recommend or do not recommend. And so in order for Planning Commission to approve the application, you'll open the public hearing and take public comment, close the public hearing, make the findings required for section 1756 for use permits, find the project CEQA exempt, and approve the application with the conditions of approval as proposed below or modified by the Planning Commission. I will go over the specific conditions of approval for this one. The use permit is as described in the staff report, conditions of approval, plans, and approved by the Planning Commission. It runs with the land, it's binding on subsequent owners. We did include as part of it that the city planner reserves the right to refer any business from the general approved business category to the Planning Commission if in her judgment it would better serve the public interest or if there's substantial land use issues. So even though we're generally approving tapper tasting rooms, restaurants, paint supplies, janitorial, sales of farm equipment, marine boat, if there's something in their application that's more than what their standard typical business would be, if the planner has concerns about that, she reserves the right to send it up to Planning Commission. So there is that protection in case any of those businesses do something unusual that we could send it up for Planning Commission review. So this conditional use permit would specifically approve lumberyard sellers and TPG Motorsports, and generally approve tap tasting rooms, restaurants over 40 seats, paint supplies, janitorial supplies, farm equipment, marine boat, motor vehicle, tire equipment, and machinery sales with minor services. In accordance with the city's general plan, noise level at the property line, and so it's not the edge of the building, but it's the property line for the property. Noise level cannot exceed 65 decibels. So depending what type of business goes there, noise mitigation measures might need to be taken. We can think about Pause. When they went in next to the nail salon, they had to soundproof one wall or sound deaden one wall to help lower the noise. So that would be an example of a sound mitigation measure that may need to be taken if that business has a higher decibel level than 65 at the property line. Businesses, when we start looking at farm equipment, marine boat, motor vehicle, they have to follow the truck ordinance of the city, and the section is included there. As always, our concern with vehicle repair businesses, there's no outdoor overnight storage of vehicles, parts, materials, etc. There is the allowance of outdoor display of merchandise, but that's clearly explained in the municipal code. retail sales, it's up against your storefront, you bring it in at night, those sort of details. So that is allowed. But no overnight storage of vehicles, parts, materials, none of that outside. Outdoor service or repair. So all cleaning, servicing, or repair of vehicles or equipment must be performed entirely within the building. There's no cleaning, servicing, or repair conducted outside of the building. We touched on this a little bit before, but parking spaces, when the parking space amount of parking spaces were calculated, we used specific uses that the developer anticipated to locate in their buildings. If a suite is changing occupancy to a higher parking requirement than originally calculated, additional parking spaces may need to be created on site. Fire sprinklers, we talked about that. Very, very unlikely that fire sprinklers are going to be required. Possibly fire separation wall between the suites, depending on what uses go there. And that's determined by the building official when the business submits for their business license application. Their business license application goes to the building official and he reviews those requirements with the building code. Businesses that provide vehicle or equipment cleaning, service, or repair have to install an oil sand separator. That's subject to approval by the city engineer. Businesses that serve food may have to install a grease interceptor or grease trap. That's subject to the city engineer. And then building permits, depending what business goes there, they may have to pull a building permit and they have to comply with California Code of Regulations. The rest are just our standard conditions of approval. So staff is available if you have any questions. The developer is here if you have any questions. Also, both the applicants for the specific businesses, Lumberyard Sellers and TBG Motorsports, are either here in person or on the line. So they're available for questions as well.
Okay, thank you. I just want to clarify something. On page 3, under the ATV dirt bike, B, lubrication, oil changes and whatnot, and then H, fuel system, change and repair of fuel lines. On the next page, it says there will be no fuel tank repair. So fuel lines and fuel tanks are different. And then when you say that the, on page 7, an oil sand separator may have to be installed. So if they're going to do oil changes, does that mean, that doesn't necessarily mean they have to have that? That the engineer still has to determine it?
Right, the city engineer will look at what services they perform and then determine if an oil sand separator is required.
And as far as the fuel, just thinking back to some of the businesses that we've dealt with, like the one on Main Street that had to get rid of their oil and whatnot. I mean, are there any conditions like that that we need to put in here? I can't remember specifically what they were, but.
We could, yeah, that was that, they have to comply with, so environmental health regulates the fuel and the oil and the recycling of it.
Yeah.
It's standard, we're gonna make them do it anyway.
Okay, so questions of staff. Chair Castellanos, do you have any questions of staff on this issue? Is he still with us? Okay.
No.
No?
No.
Commissioner Sarkozy, do you have questions of staff?
Yeah, a couple. Under the specific conditions, the first one, approval, it's called out that the city planner can reserve the right to refer any business from the general approved business category to the planning commission. I mean, with that statement in there, why, why are we calling out the limited manufacturing and the brew makers and breweries as not recommended if we have an alternative path to get back to the planning commission anyway? It just seems like an extra step if the planner can do that anyway.
If planning commission feels comfortable with that, if it's on the general approved business list, I think it gives those businesses the impression that they are more likely already approved. Staff sees those types of businesses as going to Planning Commission.
Mhm.
I don't see staff approving those at this level.
Typically,
Okay.
because at this point, we wouldn't know what they're manufacturing and what the processes would be in order to conduct that type of manufacturing. And so, and we're not used to seeing manufacturing plants that are small. Typically, when something comes in and they're going to manufacture things, they're quite large. So that was the recommendation at this point in time, was to go ahead and bring them on their own separate use permit. That way they could be properly evaluated to ensure that we're checking things of importance like the noise levels, you know, smells, odors, anything that could be attributed to that type of whatever they're all processing.
Mhm. Okay. Okay, good. And then the other question I had about later down on that same page, 6 of 9, when we talk about outdoor storage, you know, if we think of a place, a business that is bringing in something for repair, possibly, you know, that may take up a parking space, and it's a little bit concerning that, I mean, it's certainly the business's right to park there and leave a car there waiting to be serviced. It's just that's going to make, it's more of a comment, I suppose, that it's going to make the parking situation even more critical to solve. So that's all I had for right now.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Danziger?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions and statements. This is a zoning as C2, and you may have some hazardous occupancies there, which are not part of C2. And you reference a fire separation wall that may be required, I think, in Building B because of the dirt bike repair shop. So I think before you get too far down the road and people, you know, don't know where they're at, you ought to get some real feedback from the county health department on, one, are they going to need a permit? Two, what do they classify that as an occupancy based on the materials that they're going to be presented with? That's a real question there. When Commissioner Sarkozy was talking about that parking, I was thinking of Show Off Motorsports, and I forget how many parking spaces were they were allowed, but I just drove by there today, and they've got half that parking ride filled. And do they put all those vehicles, or are they all gone at the end of the working hours?
Yes. Every time I've ever drove by there in the evening, they're all put away, or in the morning. I've never seen them leave vehicles out.
Okay. Well, I mean, there's plenty of parking out there for them to be doing that. And, you know, if they're getting them all put away at night like the requirements were, that's fine. That may be a bigger problem here, you know, if they start having that much business and they're parking it all outside. So I would make that comment that you really look at that closely for the parking. Let's see. Noise. How are you going to determine 65 decibels, you know, at whatever border you're picking out here?
Public Works has a, I don't know what you call it, decibel reader, a little machine that tests. So they go stand at the property line. They tell the person to make the noise that they're going to make, and then they just check the reading. So Public Works does that.
Okay, that's a decimeter. All right. Let's see. Permit. I think that was it for me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Strong?
Since no one liked my window grill, but just, I don't want to include this as a condition. I just want the planning commissioners to consider this. Deliveries. I think it's important that, especially given the parking conditions that we're talking about, is a consideration for a condition to coordinate deliveries to these businesses after normal business hours. Because if you get a 40 or 52-foot truck coming in to deliver something in building B, they're coming in off of Roosevelt. Oh, well, there's not enough room. They can't park the truck. So now they're sitting between C and D to deliver something in B, and now you just killed your traffic control. So just something to consider for deliveries to these businesses. My other questions are for the developer and the future wine bar owners.
Okay, in that case, we'll open up the public hearing. The applicant or other people concerned with this issue, step up to the podium, give your name and address.
Derek Webb, and I'm looking at the 1455 First Street for the landlord.
Do you have anything to add to what staff has already said, or?
I believe so.
Commissioner Stroman, any questions of this applicant?
Hi, gentlemen. Thanks for coming back, Mr. Webb. I'm a little bit upset, and I'm trying to keep a straight face. I can't see my mask. I can't see my face behind this mask. But I remember very distinctly you coming to the planning commission and saying that there was going to be a bocce ball court. And,
I'm having amnesia of that.
I don't see a bocce ball court, so you might want to talk to Mr. Rossi about putting in that bocce ball court. But on a more serious note, I'm really glad you came back, and I think this is a pretty awesome adventure. And so,
thank you.
I can't speak publicly, but I will support your business. So thank you. My other question was for Mr. Grossi.
Well, based on what you just brought up, though, Mr. Webb, do you see any difficulty with deliveries of your products based on the flow of traffic and whatnot here?
Currently not at this time. Mainly all of the wine I'll be bringing in from the winery that is being made at. Currently it's going to be made in Ripon, and in the up and coming years it's going to be moved to a winery outside the city of Escalon city limits. So there'll just be my truck bringing it in before business hours or whatever is needed, whatever best fits those needs. As far as the food is charcuterie and stuff, those will all either be picked up by myself or small deliveries. I'm not going with a large distributor. I'm looking more for like local products like Stike Dairy for cheese or Fiscalini and Modesto, things like that, and trying to source some other stuff from smaller local people that wouldn't be utilizing semi-trucks. So.
Okay. Chairman, I see that Chairman Castellanos has left. Commissioner Sarkozy, do you have questions of Mr. Webb?
Hi, no, well, just certainly is a good project, exciting, and just I guess only to note that your little outdoor area in Building A is, as you probably very well know, is very close to the train tracks, and although it has it's well known in Escalon, that's going to be pretty loud there, so that'll just add to the atmosphere, I suppose.
Local ambiance.
Exactly. No, it's real exciting, and it's great to see it already at this stage. Even as the building's still being retrofitted and getting to a point to occupy. So kudos to both of you, all of you guys, all three of you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Danziger, do you have questions of Mr. Webb?
I was just going back to Diana. Diana, can you show me where the outdoor seating is going to be? Because I can't I can't imagine it here. Can you show me on the map?
The cursor's on it.
It's going to be this section here that was previously parking. Instead, it's going to be paved in more sidewalk material. And it will be this corner here.
Okay. Yeah, speaking of trains, I was out there today when one of those 1.5 mile longers came through, and boy, anything you could do, Mr. Grossi, to keep that sound deadened for those people, that would be something, because that gets real loud. You can't even hear yourself think. So, no, I think that's a great project there. It's looking very good. I would ask, during your demolition, did you turn up any artifacts?
No. We were hoping to, but no.
Okay, that was it for me.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else who would want to get up and speak on this issue? Is there anybody out there virtually who'd like to ask a question or voice a concern?
My name is Richard Souza with TPG Motorsports. We're looking at getting into 1455 First Street and Building C, and I just want to address a concern that was brought up with vehicles being parked outside that we're going to be working on. What we're going to be bringing in are smaller vehicles, and if we don't have room in the shop for it, we're not bringing it in. And honestly, it's going to be years down the road before we even get into service. We're mainly going to be doing sales. And if we do bring a vehicle in to sell, we'll never have more than one at a time.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and it's ATVs.
Anyone else like to say something on this issue?
Vice Chairman, I ask a question of Mr. Grossi.
Mr. Grossi, would you like to step up to the podium?
And staff, can you please go to the floor plan? This page, TA1. So, Mr. Grossi, I am all for this wine bar. I mean, I wish they could open it tomorrow, but then we'd have to deal with drinking wine outside. But I am genuinely concerned. I'm assuming this is your plan for the TI work and not necessarily the wine bar people. Is that correct?
Correct.
I'm genuinely concerned about the restroom, their restroom. So right now that restroom does not meet ADA. And so
They have access to the ADA is the two restrooms that the cursor's on, and that has access from the right-hand side into any of those, into any of those suites.
okay, so what is the ADA path of travel to these restrooms? So if so parking is on the back, is there a ramp on the right-hand side?
It's on the right-hand side.
Okay, so they'll just come up a little ramp.
Come out the ramp, and they can either go into the suite, what is this right here? The suite here to the right, on the right, they can go in through there. They can continue on through that, into that suite. They can go through that hallway into those restrooms. They can go from the outside down and come in through that door into those restrooms. And then continue on around and then go into that door, which is going to take you into those two suites on the end.
Okay, so what you're saying is that at any time, those accessible restrooms will be open to any one of the 4 suites?
Correct.
Okay. I would just hate to see you pouring all this money in and then somebody come by and say, you're not ADA accessible.
No, those are set up that way.
Okay. Nothing further.
Thank you.
Okay, wait 1 minute. Commissioner Sarkozy and Commissioner Dansky, do you have any further questions for Mr. Grossi?
No, I didn't at this time.
None for me.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Grossi. Okay, we'll close the public hearing, bring it back to the commission. Thoughts, a motion?
Just an overall statement. I really, really, really hope that the lumberyard sellers get into a position where they actually have to take up second suite next to. I mean, in case you guys don't know, in case you can't tell, I'd like to enjoy a glass of wine. I think it'd be really awesome, especially if you're considering a focus on local. I mean, that's what Escalon is all about. And so I think a lot of people will actually support you. So
You can take your Cub Scout group in there.
I don't think it's appropriate. Wine drinking, but maybe maybe we can have a parents meeting at the
Okay, is there a motion? On item 5?
I don't know what they're doing tonight, but I guess I'll motion to go with staff's recommendation. Commissioner Gannon, pressure on, so I have to read it. I do that. Actually, before I make a motion, I do have one question for staff. I love this development. I think it's going to be awesome for our city. My only question is, does bringing in all of these businesses put a strain on our sewer treatment plant?
We can handle infill development.
It's just anything outside of that.
Correct.
Last thing I want is for us to go through this and then come to find out can't handle it. Okay, so all that being said, I would like to make, I have to go through all of my pages. I would like to make a motion to approve the project and make the findings that that this project is as required per section 17.56, the use permits. That we find the project CEQA class 1 categorically exempt under section 15.301, section A, existing facilities with interior or exterior alterations, and 15.332, infill development, and authorize staff to file the CEQA notice of exemption and approve the application with conditions of approval as proposed by staff.
Is there a second?
I'll second the motion.
Thank you, Mark. All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. And we're missing one commissioner, so it passes 4-0. All right, thank you all. Get back to where we're supposed to be. Administrative matters is next on the agenda. Do we have any? No? Matters presented from the audience. Is there anything that's not on the agenda tonight that anyone would like to bring up or discuss or throw at us? No? Okay, staff communications.
I have none.
I'm trying to think of anything. We've got a lot of things going on.
Thank you.
Potential.
Thank you.
Merry Christmas.
So we do have a lot of stuff going on in the planning department. We have a potential developer who is looking at that lot over on First Street for a senior housing project, which would be age 55 and up, and would be deed restricted seniors.
Between Daniels and Pioneer over there?
Farther down, it's got the existing house on it. It's the old, I think it's Clesson's.
Oh, Clesson's
Mary
house.
Clesson's
Okay.
house, yes.
Okay.
So it's very early in the stages. We're still trying to make sure that they can move forward in the direction before we get them to an extent. And so we are looking very favorably and hopeful that that will move forward. So we've been doing a lot of stuff with that. We're hoping to have that some type of conceptual drawings available sometime in January. And then you're to talk about the joint meeting, and that'll be a part of that. Other projects that are going on, we just have a lot of busy stuff going, but
We do have some projects coming in January.
yeah, that's
We will
true.
have a January meeting.
Definitely a January meeting. Two projects so far are booked out for the January meeting. So that's all I can think of at this time.
So, I haven't talked with the council, but I want to look at doing, like a joint workshop with the council and planning commission. Their second meeting of January on the 9th, it's actually Tuesday, the 19th, because Monday is a holiday. But potentially meeting at 6, doing a workshop, and then the council would have their meeting at 7.
Then the workshop will be here.
Yes. That's on Tuesday, January 19th, 2021.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where did 2020 go?
Emphasis on the one.
I don't know if it went too fast or went by too slow. It just depends on.
I don't even know.
how you
Do we have
Yeah.
either?
Okay, Commissioner Communications. Commissioner Danziger, do you have any communications for us?
I was just going to ask you about Orlando's again. To begin with.
No update.
Nothing new.
Nothing new.
What about Lear? Are they ever going to finish?
They're making progress.
They are.
They're making progress.
I remember them specifically saying once that they were had completed all of the obstacles that you have put up in front of them, that their forte was building, that they would finish very quickly. You having any ETA?
We have not heard an ETA, no.
All right.
There are
That was
days
it.
gone by, and there are days that most people are not working, and there have been working crews out there. And
They're
so that,
definitely moving more than they were before.
Commissioner Sarkozy, any communications?
I'll unmute myself. Thank you, everybody. Wishing everybody a Merry Christmas, and yes, congratulations to the new mayor. And he did. I did hear. It's interesting you say the senior housing, because that was one of the first things that he mentioned. So that's right in step with this. So that's good to hear that moving along so quickly. Already in January might see something. So that's exciting. Have a good Christmas, everybody, and we'll see each other soon enough.
Thank you. Commissioner Stroman.
So I just kind of want to go back and reiterate and say thank you to Diana on the presentation for the Shanmar Enterprises. I can tell that you really worked hard on putting that presentation together, and it's definitely appreciated. So thank you. So on Friday night, I attended the outdoor meeting the outdoor movie in the rain, and then Saturday was the virtual parade, drive-through parade, and I just really want to say thank you to Tammy, and thank you to city staff, and to the Kiwanis and the Lions and everybody that made those two events possible, because when we pulled in, and I don't know if you went to the parade or not, but when we came down and tried to make a turn to join the parade route, it was no, go the whole way to the end. At that time, it was at least 6 blocks long. And so I think the town rallied around you. And so for my family, thank you. It definitely brought some normalcy to this absolutely crazy year. And then only other item is I kind of want to second what Commissioner Sarkozy said. I want to wish you all a very Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to you and your families. Been a crazy, crazy year, and I think we have some hope on the horizon. So 2021 can only get better.
As a member of the American Legion Honor Guard, I led the parade. I didn't view it. I was in front and center.
Awesome.
But, yes, all of your staff, I mean, you guys are not working under ideal conditions. And the fact that you're getting done as much as you're getting done and doing it so well, I think you definitely deserve a kudos. I don't know, I'll see what I can do. Talk to Pat and see what he can do. Anything else from anyone before I adjourn the meeting? Okay.
I just say Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to all of you.
Yes.
Thank you, Kurt.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kurt.
Meeting adjourned. All right.
Have